Hello and welcome to the Learn English Lab. Today's podcast is an advanced English listening practice, and our topic is how to keep a conversation going.
It's a topic that I think everyone at some point has struggled with. That moment where the conversation just stops.
Right, that dreaded silence. Conversations are, they're the fabric of our lives, right? Networking, meetings, dating, everything.
It all depends on dialogue.
And our mission in this deep dive is to move you way beyond that awkward small talk. We're going to build a full toolkit from the ground up with a really special focus on the power of storytelling.
We want to help you turn those superficial chats into something memorable, something that actually builds a connection.
So we'll start with the fundamentals, then dive deep into how to structure a great story, and then we'll get into some advanced techniques and even look at how the pros do it.
The goal here isn't just to exchange information. It's about building real rapport, sharing experiences, and getting that back and forth rhythm that makes a conversation feel alive.
It's a skill that helps everyone, whether you're an introvert building confidence or an extrovert who wants to add a little more substance to your charm.
Exactly. Everyone benefits from being a more engaging speaker.
Okay, so let's get into it. Before we even get to the advanced stuff, the storytelling, we have to establish the basics. The two-way street, so to speak.
The foundation. And for me, that has to start with active listening.
The unsung hero of communication.
It truly is. And it's so much more than just, staying quiet while you wait for your turn to speak. It's about full empathetic engagement with the other person.
I always think of it as a kind of gift. In a world full of distractions and notifications, giving someone your undivided attention is, well, it's rare. And it builds trust almost instantly.
It does. You're not just hearing the words. You're trying to process their intent, their emotions, all the nonverbal stuff they're giving you.
So how does that look in practice? What are people actually doing when they're listening actively?
Well, there are nonverbal cues, like nodding, maybe leaning in a little, and making eye contact, not staring, but comfortable eye contact.
Okay, that's a key distinction.
Yeah.
Not aggressive eye contact.
Right. And then there are the verbal cues, little things like, oh, that's interesting, or tell me more about that. They're signals that you're tracking with them, that you value what they're saying.
And this isn't just, a nice thing to do. There's real psychology behind it. I think it goes back to Carl Rogers, the psychologist, right?
It does. His work on person-centered therapy showed that this kind of empathetic, non-judgmental listening is what forges deep connections. It makes the speaker feel seen, understood.
You're basically stepping into their shoes for a moment.
And that's where people often stumble, the practical application. The urge to jump in with your own story is so strong.
Oh, absolutely. Someone says they had a tough trip, and your first thought is, oh, I had a tough trip too. Let me tell you about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that just steals the spotlight. Instead, you keep the focus on them. Ask a follow-up question. Something like, wow, that sounds intense. What was the one highlight for you, even with all the trouble?
That one simple question completely changes the dynamic. It shows you're actually interested in their experience.
So on that point of eye contact, for someone who's maybe a little shy or nervous, how do you do that without feeling like you're just staring?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
It's not about a staring contest. I've heard of the 70-30 rule. You maintain eye contact for about 70% of the time they're talking.
And the other 30%.
You just take natural breaks. Look to the side for a second, glance at your coffee cup, then bring your gaze back. It feels much more natural and less like an interrogation.
It signals focus, not intensity. I like that.
And a really good tip for practicing this is to try summarizing what the other person said.
The playback technique.
Yeah. It shows you were invested enough to really process it. You could say something like, okay, so it sounds like changing careers was a huge challenge, especially with that new software. How did you get through that initial learning curve?
That's powerful. It proves you heard the details, and it moves the conversation forward with a new, thoughtful question.
If you really want to get analytical about it, you can even, with permission, record a phone call and listen back.
Oh, that's brave.
It is, but you could tally it. How many times did I interrupt versus how many times did I ask a follow-up question? I bet you see that the more you listen, the longer and better the conversations get.
It really builds that conversational muscle.
Okay, so after you've listened, the ball is back in your court. The next skill is asking good questions. And the big pitfall here is the closed question.
The conversation killer. The questions that only get you a yes or a no.
Exactly. It's a dead end.
The key is shifting to open-ended questions. They invite people to tell a story, to elaborate. Instead of, did you like the concert? You ask.
What was the best moment of the concert for you?
Precisely. You get a story, an emotion, not just a one-word answer.
And you have to tailor these questions.
Yeah.
It's different in a social setting versus a professional one.
Of course. Socially, you're looking for passions, for common ground. So instead of, do you have hobbies, which is a bit bland.
You could try something like, what's a hobby you've always wanted to get into but haven't had the chance yet?
I love that one. It opens up a whole conversation about dreams and obstacles. Or if they say they're a teacher, don't just leave it there. Ask, what was the moment you knew you wanted to go into education?
You get their origin story, not just their job title.
And professionally, it's often more about challenges and insights. Asking something like, what's the biggest hurdle your team is facing right now? Shows you're thinking like a collaborator, not just making small talk.
We should probably touch on cultural nuance here too, because a question that's normal in one culture might feel way too direct in another.
That is such a critical point. In some cultures, especially in many parts of Asia, asking about personal challenges or finances early on it's just not done.
So what's the strategy? How do you navigate that?
You soften the approach, and you always give them an out. You could say, if you don't mind me asking, what's your perspective on? That little preface makes all the difference.
It gives them permission to decline without any awkwardness.
Exactly. And if you're ever unsure, just start with broad, indirect questions. Ask about the industry as a whole, not their specific role in it.
So you let them set the pace for how personal the conversation gets.
You mirror their level of disclosure. It's the safest and most respectful way.
So for a practical challenge, a listener could try to create a list, maybe 50 open-ended questions for different situations.
Work, social, family.
Yeah.
And then practice using one a day. It's about moving from knowing the theory to actually doing it.
Okay, so that brings us to the third foundation, reciprocity. This is that delicate balance of sharing your own stuff without taking over.
Yes. The dreaded one-upper. You have to avoid that at all costs.
We've all met that person.
Yeah.
You tell a story about climbing a hill, they tell a story about climbing a mountain.
Right. It turns a conversation into a competition. True reciprocity is about relating, not competing. If they share something, you can offer a brief, related snippet from your life, and then, this is the key, you turn the focus right back to them.
So something like, that sounds incredibly tough. I remember my first 5K was exhausting in a similar way. For you, what was the lowest point during that marathon?
Perfect. You connect, you share for maybe 20 seconds, and then you hand the baton back. It keeps the flow going.
And a big part of this is matching the emotional tone, isn't it?
Oh, it's essential. If they're telling a funny, self-deprecating story, you respond with something equally light. If they're sharing a serious professional setback, you meet them on that level with a thoughtful response.
You have to be on the same page emotionally.
And for anyone who gets nervous and thinks, I won't have anything to share, a great strategy is to prepare a few relatable snippets.
What do you mean by that?
Just have 2 or 3 short 20-second anecdotes ready on common topics. A funny tech glitch, a commuting problem, something about the weather. They're low-stakes stories you can drop in easily to show you're participating.
They're like conversational bridges.
That's a great way to put it. They keep things moving without the pressure of having to come up with a brilliant, epic story on the spot.
So how do you know if you've crossed the line from good reciprocity into competitive one-upping? Is there a tell?
The tell is in their response. If they start giving you really short answers, like just, or right, and their body language closes off, they look away, cross their arms, you've probably lost them. You've started a monologue.
So a good rule is that your response should be shorter than their initial story.
Especially early on, it's a tennis match, not a bowling alley. You have to keep hitting the ball back.
Okay, so with those foundations in place, listening, asking good questions, and sharing in a balanced way, we can finally get to the real game changer.
The transformative part.
The power of storytelling. This is what takes you from a transactional exchange to something truly captivating.
And it works because we are fundamentally wired for stories. It's in our DNA. It's how we've shared knowledge for thousands of years.
It's an evolutionary thing, right? A list of rules about which berries are poisonous isn't as memorable as a story about what happened to the guy who ate the wrong ones.
Exactly. The story sticks because it engages our emotions. And neuroscience backs this up completely. When you hear a good story, it's not just the language parts of your brain that light up.
The sensory parts do too. You can almost see and feel what's happening.
Yes, and your brain releases chemicals. Neuroscientist Paul Zak has done amazing research on this. He found that compelling stories increase oxytocin.
The trust hormone.
The trust hormone. It makes us feel bonded and empathetic. The listener's brain actually starts to mirror the emotions of the storyteller. You're literally getting in sync with them on a biological level.
That's fascinating. Does the story have to be super dramatic to get that effect?
Not at all. It's not about drama, it's about emotional relevance. A simple, relatable story about, say, the frustration of being on hold with customer service can create that same bonding effect because it's a shared human experience.
Relatability is more important than high drama.
In most day-to-day conversations, absolutely.
And the practical shift this creates is huge. You stop reciting dry facts about your life. So instead of saying, I work in marketing, you
tell a mini story. Last week I had to pitch a campaign to this really skeptical client. It felt less like a presentation and more like an episode of Shark Tank.
Instantly more interesting. It invites a dozen follow-up questions. How did it go? What made them so skeptical?
Right. You've replaced a job title with a human drama. And in today's world of Zoom calls and screen fatigue, stories are more essential than ever. They inject that human element that gets lost through a screen.
It's the jolt of energy that can wake up a whole meeting.
It really is.
But a good story isn't just a random memory. It has a structure, like a framework that makes it work.
Yes, and it's a simple one, adapted from things like Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. For a conversation, we can boil it down to 3 parts: a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Or setup, conflict resolution.
Exactly. It's a mental blueprint that keeps you concise and ensures you make a point.
So let's break that down. The whole thing for a casual chat should probably be, under 2 minutes?
A minute or 2 is the sweet spot. Any longer, and you risk losing them.
Okay, so stage 1, the beginning, the setup. This is where you set the scene, introduce who's involved, and establish a baseline of what's normal.
You're trying to hook them quickly with something relatable. So there I was on my first solo backpacking trip. You're establishing the normal world before the disruption.
Which brings us to stage 2, the middle, the conflict.
This is the heart of the story, the challenge, the obstacle, the thing that goes wrong. This is where the emotion has to peak. Without a conflict, you don't have a story.
You just have a list of events.
A chronological report. The conflict is what makes us care.
And then stage 3.
Yeah.
The end, the resolution. You wrap it up. What was the outcome? What did you learn?
And crucially, you want to end in a way that hands the conversation back to them, and with a lesson learned or a question that prompts a response.
Let's use that travel mishap story as a concrete example.
Okay, so you start with the setup. I was backpacking through Europe last summer, so excited for my first solo train ride from Paris to Amsterdam. I was feeling on top of the world.
Relatable excitement. Then the conflict. But I completely misread the schedule, missed my connection, and ended up stranded late at night in this tiny Belgian town where everything was closed. My phone was dying. I started to panic.
That's the tension. You feel the panic with the storyteller. And finally, the resolution. Just as I was about to give up and sleep on a bench, this kind old couple saw me and offered me a room in their little B&B. What started as a total disaster ended up being my favorite memory of the whole trip. It taught me that sometimes the best things happen when your plans fall apart. Have you ever had a disaster turn into something wonderful like that?
And that's the perfect handoff. The structure is so clear: setup, conflict, resolution, and then a question. It's a tool for dialogue, not a performance.
That's the key. You're building a bridge to their experience.
So once you have that structure down, you need to have more than one story in your pocket. You need a whole library.
A versatile story library, yes. Because the right story depends entirely on the context.
Let's talk about some essential types. First up, the personal anecdote.
These are your bread and butter, your life experiences. A really powerful subtype is the growth story, which is great for job interviews or mentoring.
So in an interview, you could talk about a time a project was failing, and you organized an informal late-night session that not only saved it, but also brought the team closer.
Exactly. It shows problem-solving and leadership through a narrative.
Okay, type 2, humorous tales.
Essential for breaking the ice. And the best kind is often self-deprecating humor. It shows you don't take yourself too seriously, which makes you incredibly approachable.
Like telling the story of a cooking disaster where you tried to make something fancy and it ended up looking like a science experiment gone wrong.
Yes. It gets a laugh and creates an instant bond over shared imperfection.
Type 3, inspirational stories.
These are for motivating people or teaching a principle. They often focus on overcoming the odds.
So if a friend is afraid to take a risk, you could share a story about one of your own spectacular early failures.
And how that failure was actually the feedback you needed to eventually succeed. It reframes failure as a necessary step, not a dead end.
I like that. Okay, type 4, Relatable fails.
These are a little different from humorous tales. They're about vulnerability in small, everyday situations. The goal is creating a sense of me too.
Like spilling coffee all over yourself on a first date.
Right, or wearing two different colored shoes to an important meeting without realizing it. It's a blunder that makes you human and instantly relatable.
And finally, type 5. Hypothetical stories.
The what-if scenarios. These are fantastic for brainstorming or just having fun with abstract ideas.
Like, imagine if in the future, AI could just filter out all the boring small talk for us. Would that be amazing? Or would we lose something important?
It turns a dry topic like AI ethics into a playful, engaging narrative.
Okay, so let's apply these to some specific high-stakes scenarios. How about a networking event?
All right. You meet someone struggling to break into a new industry. Instead of giving generic advice, you tell your growth story about how you relentlessly rewrote a cold email for 3 days until you finally got a reply from a founder.
And the analysis here is that you're highlighting your persistence, not just your luck. And you're inviting the question, wow, how did you write that email? Which connects directly to their problem.
It provides value through story.
Scenario 2, a first date.
The conversation turns to childhood. You shared a personal anecdote about building a cardboard box spaceship, which sparked your love for sci-fi movies.
It's light, it's a little vulnerable, and it links your past to a present interest that you might share. It opens the door for them to share a similar memory.
You're building a shared history in a small way.
Scenario 3, a tense professional meeting. A project is delayed.
Instead of getting defensive, you tell an inspirational story about a similar crisis in the past. You focus on how the team pivoted to a creative solution that actually ended up saving money.
So you're not ignoring the problem, you're framing it in a narrative of success, shifting the mood from panic to, how can we do that again?
It's leadership through storytelling. It invites the question, how can we apply that lesson right now?
And the last one, an online forum. Someone's frustrated learning a new skill.
You share a relatable fail. I know that feeling. When I started learning guitar, my fingers were bleeding and I wanted to quit. Then you share the resolution, the one YouTube tutorial that finally made it click.
It validates their struggle and offers a helpful solution, all within a quick, empathetic story. It invites others to share their own tips.
So the key takeaway here is to consciously build this library. Aim for maybe 10 to 20 stories that you know inside and out.
And practice telling them. Maybe record yourself on your phone.
Yes. Rehearsal is what makes it feel effortless in the moment. When you record yourself, listen for a few things. Is the conflict clear? Are you using sensory details? And what's your pacing like? Are you using pauses for effect?
If you can nail those 3 things, the story will land every time. So once you're comfortable with the basics and you have a few stories, how do you level up? What are the advanced techniques?
This is where you move from just telling a story to crafting an experience. And the first step is using vivid language.
Painting a picture.
Exactly. Don't just say, the sunset was nice. Say, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting this deep golden glow across the valley. Use metaphors. The city streets pulsed like veins.
But you have to be careful with that in a professional setting. Right. You don't want to sound overly poetic.
That's a great point. The key is to be selective. Use vivid language for the emotional high points of the story, not for describing the conference room table, and focus on strong verbs rather than a ton of adjectives. The engine sputtered is better than the engine was acting poorly.
Okay, technique 2, incorporating dialogue.
This is such an easy win. Quoting what someone said makes the story feel immediate and real. He looked at me and said, "You're hired," and I almost fell out of my chair.
It brings the scene to life.
Third technique, building suspense.
The strategic pause.
The strategic pause. And little teaser phrases. I hit send, and I had no idea that click was about to change everything. That little pause before the resolution makes the listener lean in.
Fourth, and this is crucial, linking back.
Never leave your story hanging. Always end with a question that hands the conversational baton back. Has anything like that ever happened to you? It ensures the story is a bridge, not a dead end.
And fifth, multi-sensory expansion.
We always default to sight, but the best storytellers use all the senses. The smell of the bakery, the texture of the croissant, the sound of the vendors shouting. It makes the memory feel complete.
Okay, now let's talk about the pitfalls. The common mistakes even good speakers make.
Number 1, by a mile, is rambling.
Going on for too long.
If you're going past 2 minutes in a casual chat, you've probably lost them. The fix is to be a ruthless editor. Know your setup, conflict and resolution, and cut anything that doesn't serve the story.
Mistake number 2. Lacking relevance. Telling a great story that has nothing to do with the current conversation.
The fix here is to listen first, then relate. And if you realize you're off track, just own it. Anyway, that's a story for another time. Back to your point about just pivot gracefully.
Third mistake. Over-exaggerating.
A little embellishment for humor is fine, but if you bend the truth too much, you lose trust. Authenticity is always more powerful. If you catch yourself, just correct it with a laugh. Okay, maybe it was 50 people, not 1,000.
Right. And fourth, not inviting a response.
A monologue. It's a conversation killer. Always, always, always end with a question. And watch your audience. If their eyes are glazing over, that's your cue to wrap it up and make your next story shorter.
And what about social pitfalls, like cultural issues or repeating yourself?
Both are critical. You have to know your audience and avoid stories that rely on stereotypes. And you have to keep a mental log of who you've told your best stories to. There's nothing worse than someone saying, "Oh yeah, you told me that one."
She says you aren't really present with them, just recycling material.
Exactly.
So delivery is obviously a huge part of this. The nonverbal cues.
They're half the battle. Your body language leaning in, using your hands to illustrate something, it all pulls the listener into the story with you.
And using those pauses to check in, to see if they're still with you.
That's your real-time feedback. And don't be afraid of a little silence. You can use it as a pivot. You know, that silence reminds me of a funny story. It can be springboard to your next point.
Okay, let's zoom out. What does this look like at the highest level? Let's talk about some master communicators.
Sure. Let's start with someone like Barack Obama. His 2004 convention speech is a masterclass. He didn't just list policies. He told his personal story, his parents, his background, to humanize these big abstract ideas about America.
He used his relatability to bridge divides. The pauses he used were so powerful, letting the emotional weight of his words sink in.
Then you have someone like Oprah Winfrey. She strategically shares her own vulnerabilities, her own struggles.
And that creates a space where her guests feel safe enough to open up and be vulnerable too.
It's empathy in action. She validates their feelings first, connects with her own story briefly, and then puts the focus back on them. She showed the world that vulnerability is a source of strength and connection.
And what about in the business world? Steve Jobs.
A brilliant storyteller. He didn't sell products, he sold narratives. The story of the iPhone wasn't about specs, it was a story of conflict.
The villain was the clunky, stupid phones we all used to have.
Exactly. And the iPhone was the hero, the resolution that would solve all our problems. He framed the product as the magical ending to a story we were all living.
So we keep coming back to this idea of empathy. It really is the glue that holds all of this together.
It is. When you share an emotion, not just a fact, you create a real connection. And practical empathy means you validate their feelings first, always. If someone shares a loss, you don't jump in with your own story of loss.
You start with, "That sounds incredibly difficult. How are you coping?"
Yes. Validate, connect briefly, then return the focus to them.
How does all this translate to the digital world, to texts and video calls?
The principles are the same, but the tools are different. In text, you use emojis to add that missing emotional tone. On social media, you can thread a story over multiple posts to keep engagement going.
And on video calls, you have to be extra descriptive with your language, right? To make up for the lack of shared physical space.
You have to paint the picture even more vividly with your words, or even use screen sharing to show a photo that helps tell the tale.
So looking at the long-term benefits, mastering these skills really can change your career and your relationships.
It absolutely can. Great leaders inspire with stories, great salespeople connect with stories, and great friends build deeper bonds through sharing authentic tales.
And there's even a mental health benefit. Better social connections reduce stress. The act of structuring your own experiences into narrative can be therapeutic in itself.
It's a practice known as narrative therapy. It helps people process difficult experiences.
So for our listeners who want to put this into practice, what are some final, actionable exercises?
I'd suggest starting a daily storytelling journal. Just write one short story from your day. Using that setup, conflict, resolution structure, it trains your brain to think in narratives.
You could also do some role-playing with a friend. Practice telling stories in a simulated networking event or a difficult meeting.
And finally, track your progress. Keep a little journal. How long did your conversations last? How engaged did the other person seem? Which stories really landed well? Setting goals like trying to increase your average conversation time by a few minutes each week can make a huge difference.
We have covered so much ground in this deep dive. The essential toolkit is really clear. Start with that foundation of active listening and open-ended questions. Create that safe space.
And then, when the moment is right, you weave in a concise, relevant story using that powerful setup conflict resolution structure.
And our final thought for you to take away from this is that authenticity is everything. It will always win out over a perfectly polished but fake performance.
Absolutely. Stick to the truth, share your real self, and focus on the genuine connection you're building. That's the real prize.
So your challenge is this. Identify one story from your own life right now that fits that simple structure, beginning, middle, and end. And then make a commitment to share it in your very next conversation.
What story will you share first? And what unexpected, meaningful connection will that effort help you build? That is the immediate challenge for you to take on.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. If you found this useful, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more advanced English listening practice.